We're the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and we're fighting for lower taxes, less waste, and accountable government. I'm Chris Sims. I'm the Alberta director. I'm here with Franco Terrazzano, federal director, and Nicholas. He's holding down the fort, and La Belle Provence. He's the Quebec director. We've got some breaking news here. Franco, I'm going to throw it right to you, man. Prime Minister Mark Carney, is he climbing down out of the tree that is banning the sale of gas and diesel powered vehicles? Is this a win?
Well, look, it's Canadian Taxpayers Federation supporters. I mean, we pressured the government so hard. Huge credit to all you watching to force Carney to start to back down from the government's plan to ban the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035. Okay, so look, Carney just announced that he is going to delay this ban for a year, and then he's going to launch a 60-day review. Now, there's a lot of issues right now, and this fight is absolutely not over, right? Number one, Carney's just delaying it for a year, right? That's it. Just delaying it for a year. So we forced him to back down. It's Canadian Taxpayers Federation supporters who've been absolutely hammering the government over its ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035. Now, why a lot of this is so relevant right this second is because that ban starts to kick in a couple months, okay? In 2026, where the government was going to mandate that all new vehicles sold, 20% of them had to be electric vehicles. So the start of the ban was in a couple months from now in 2026. Now, because the CTF, our supporters, the tax fighters have been absolutely relentless on this, kind of turned this issue into a national issue, right? Showing that most Canadians are against the ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035. Showing Canadians, showing politicians just how extremely expensive this entire scheme is going to be. So Carney, after feeling the heat, he's backing down a little bit, right? He's delaying it. He's going to do a 2-month review, but the fight is absolutely not over, okay? This horrible policy, it's not in the garbage bin where it belongs, so we got to keep fighting. So a small little victory showing a pressure is working. They're on their back foot. We got to keep the pressure up now.
I'm going to get to you in a second here, Nicholas, but I got to stress that it wasn't so long ago that nobody was fighting this except for the Taxpayers Federation and the folks over at Canadians for Affordable Energy and a couple other people. And it was always, the class consensus that, oh, well, of course we're going to switch to electric vehicles. Same, very similar, I find, Franco, to the fight against the carbon tax. It was awesome until suddenly it wasn't. And now we actually have the Globe and Mail, which is
Yep.
the pace car, okay, for the Parliamentary Press Gallery, saying, time to pull the plug. And this is their editorial board saying this. So
Yeah,
if
let
you're,
me just read the
yeah,
title, okay? Let me just read the title straight from the Globe and Mail. Ottawa should pull the plug on EV mandates. And whenever you hear EV mandates, that means the ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles. Ready? The Globe and Mail editorial headline: Ottawa should pull the plug on EV mandates. Let me just read you one quote that I found from this editorial. It was fantastic, okay? Quote, it's a backdoor subsidy for the EV industry aimed at inflating the cost of fossil fuel powered vehicles in order to push consumers into electric vehicles. End quote. Okay, so there you have it, folks. I mean, thanks for your pressure to force the Carney government onto its back foot. They're feeling the pressure. Even the Globe and Mail, okay, is now writing editorials that Ottawa should pull the plug on EV mandates.
Nicholas, you have to be a little bit happy with this news. Like, it's not over. Like we said, the war's not over. But we've blown up a bridge and cut off a couple supply lines here, man. Like, I think this is a mini victory, isn't it?
Oh, is it? I mean, it's the war is still going on, but yes, the first battle is won, and that's very it's very much motivating for every taxpayer that has been fighting with us on this campaign for the last couple of years, because it's important to remember ourselves, to remind everyone that in 2022, many people thought that this was only going to be a rumor, that the federal government would not be going forward with this, and then eventually they did. They did push for what is called the zero emission vehicle standard, that also known as the EV mandate, or as we should call it, the ban on gas and diesel vehicle by 2035. And eventually, then they push even more further down the road that standard by adding some additional plug-in hybrid vehicle in their standard to make sure that they would be able to reach their goal by 2035. And then that's where people actually saw that this was going to be a reality, that eventually we would be not able to actually choose the vehicle of our choice by in about 10 years, that this would be hurting families, it would be hurting our industries, it would be also provoking a massive shift into our economy as it is, and this would be coming also to a heavy cost, maybe on the energy bills, maybe for through subsidies and through all of the investment that the government would be literally bringing us into, because we have actually found some reports from the Ministry of the Natural Resources that was published last year telling us that this would cost taxpayers by 2040 up to $300 billion to make sure that we would reach the goals for this so-called EV mandate. So the fact that people are finally realizing that this is going to happen, that they know that there's going to be a cost to it, not just in matter of choices every time they go or the next time they'll go to the car dealership, but also that they will have to pay for it one way or another, then this full realization is basically a bit like you said, like the carbon tax. At first, you think that this is just a joke, a rumor, and then you find out it's actually a real threat, and that's where the mobilization actually started. We're seeing the first step into this battle, and it's good. It's good to see that we see some reaction from the different level of government to it. But it's far from being over. There's a 60 days consultation that's going to be taking place from now until probably November or I'm not exactly, so probably mid-November or something like that. So until then, it's important to maintain the pressure to make sure that the federal government does not just suspend that ban, but actually scrap it altogether. And that would also send a clear message to some other provinces like British Columbia and Quebec, which have their own ban into place with similar scheme like the federal government has been pushing for the last couple of years.
I'm going to get back to you with the provinces in a second, but I love how you point out that we've got what, a 60-day window of consultation here that they're doing. Okay, so Franco and Nicholas, is now the time then to bombard members of parliament and especially the liberal ones saying, no, no, man, pull the whole plug on this thing?
Right now,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like, look, the pressure has to be on right this second. Now, let me just say 2 points. Let me make 2 points here. Number one, we've already seen that taxpayer pressure, Canadian pressure, can force Carney to repeal dumb Trudeau policies. Okay? Carney got rid of the consumer carbon tax. And let's be honest, we all know that the carbon tax was Liberal MPs' favorite tax all but 2 seconds ago, right? We're all old enough to remember that. But taxpayer pressure, Canadian pressure, forced Carney to repeal the consumer carbon tax. More fights left there, but that's a win. Number two, Carney got rid of Trudeau's digital service tax. Another dumb policy that would make life more expensive here in Canada. And number three, how can we forget, right, that Canadian Taxpayers Federation supporters forced Carney to end Trudeau's capital gains tax hike. So we have a clear pattern that when Canadians band together, us tax fighters, thousands of us, we can force the government to move in the right direction. And Carney's backing off, delaying the ban for 1 year shows that politicians are feeling your pressure. They're on their back foot. And when anyone's on their back foot, it's time to keep pushing. So right now is the time that us tax fighters have to get engaged and say, no, 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 no. A 1 year pause is not enough. Put that ban right into the trash can where it belongs. But number two, let's talk about that 60-day review, because
Okay.
I've got a big concern about that 60-day review. Okay.
Yeah.
I worry that the 60-day review is just going to turn into backroom negotiations with corporations where the government, uses billions of taxpayers' dollars to try to convince those corporations to get in line and to stop making such a fuss over the government's ban on the sale of gas and diesel vehicles, new ones, by 2035, right? And why do I say I'm worried about it? Well, I think Ottawa, the federal government, has a history of using taxpayer cash to try to solve its political issues, right? Like, let's not forget that the federal government has already put taxpayers on the hook for about $30 billion in corporate welfare to multinational corporations like Honda, Volkswagen, Stellantis, and Northvolt. Okay. And then many more subsidies also for the EV to support the EV supply chain. So one of my biggest concerns with the 60-day review is that it's not going to be a real public consultation. It's really going to be backroom negotiations between the Carney government and corporations. And I'm really worried that taxpayers are going to be on the hook for billions of dollars in corporate welfare. Now, the reason that is it's so important and ties into my first point is that now is the time to make the public pressure, right? Tell Carney, no, 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 no. This can't be backroom negotiations that leads to billions in corporate welfare. No, 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 no. You can't just water down a ban. You have to scrap it. It'll make life more expensive, 100%, and it's going to be a huge taxpayer boondoggle.
Very well said. And I'm glad you brought up the corporate angle here because, yeah, that's a huge risk here. There's all the public fight that happens in the House of Commons, but a lot of stuff happens in those offices behind the curtains. And just let's be honest here. Even if they threw a whole bunch of money at those companies, it still wouldn't fix it. We have a math problem here, folks. Number one, we don't have the money for this. I don't need to tell either of you on this call that we have unmoney. We're more than $1 trillion in debt. We're blowing through $1 billion a week just in interest payments. Okay. Burn a hospital down every single Saturday night. That's what we're paying on debt interest payments. So we don't have the cash to build the infrastructure. And we do not have the infrastructure to generate the electricity to make these vehicles go. So this is just like a mathematical non-starter. So if Carney actually has his ear bent by these corporations who are saying, hey, I know how to make this sweet for you, like it still wouldn't work. Wouldn't we be just throwing good money after bad?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the whole problem, right? That's the whole problem. And you kind of see this nightmare situation coming here with the Northvolt, right? Issue, right? The subsidies for the battery project that was being in Quebec. Look, government is there's a reason government bureaucrats are in government and not in the market, right? Like there's a reason. Okay. So look, like all corporate welfare is a bad deal. And the reason I highlight the Quebec situation, what's going on there, is because both the federal government and the Quebec government put taxpayers on the hook for potentially billions of dollars so that Northvolt can build his battery project in Quebec. Well, Quebec has now been like, well, this is a bad deal for Quebec taxpayers. So the government of Quebec is pulling its funding, trying to recoup some of its taxpayer cash. But look, we haven't heard anything from Ottawa or the federal government on this. And I think the question for those politicians in Ottawa is like, look, if even the Quebec government can realize that this is a bad deal for Quebecers, there's absolutely no way that taxpayers across Canada should be footing the bill for that corporate welfare. But it all just ties into the nonsense that like corporate welfare is not a panacea for economic growth and prosperity, right? It's the exact opposite way to grow the economy. Look, if you want to really worry about Canada's economic status or industrial competitiveness, then they should be cutting taxes, cutting red tape, and hey, cutting this ban on the sale of gas and diesel vehicles, new sales by 2035. Like this should be the first place that the government should be get rid of regulations or mandates.
Ding, 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 all the way across. A few things quickly before I come to Nicholas, because I feel like we're cyberbullying him a little bit by talking about Quebec like this. So, quickly, there was breaking news just this morning saying that year over year, the sale of battery-powered vehicles went down by 30%. 30. Okay, the latest quarter is showing that what I would argue is a more natural sale and demand, now that the subsidies are mostly gone, is now around 8% of sales. Imagine as a car dealer having to just artificially somehow make that 20% of sales per year. That restriction was going to kick in January. So imagine trying to bridge that gap. You can't. It would just be a disaster. Nicholas, I want to bring you back into this here because Franco pointed out that, hey, even if Quebec is getting the picture, it's time for Ottawa to wake up. Can you update people on what's happening in Quebec? Because, of course, because they're special, Quebec has their own ban on the sale of gas and diesel powered vehicles, and British Columbia also has one. I'll jump in on that. But, Nicholas, what's happening in Quebec first?
Yes, well, just first to go back on your previous comments about the state of the market, I think it's perfectly clear what's going on. I mean, like you said, the money is not there, we don't have the energy. And also the main reason why, or the main driver for the purchase of those EVs over the last couple of years was mainly due to the subsidies that were offered by the different level of government, maybe from the Quebec government or the federal government or both combined, depending on the jurisdiction you live in. But overall, since those two, or so since those subsidies has been cut, you have seen a decline in the purchase of EVs, and demonstrating that basically the main reason why people were able to buy those vehicles is because the government was giving them money to do so, or else it was not possible. And ever since, we have seen a decline in the purchases. So, and the truth is, we don't have the money neither for those kind of subsidies. So it's clearly showing that this country and no jurisdiction, including Quebec, is ready for that transition. Now, when it comes to Quebec, there was actually a first carve out that was done. You would be surprised to learn right now, and I'm not joking, based on the current standard or the different ban, maybe from from the federal government, the BC or Quebec. Quebec will be the only jurisdiction in Canada by 2035 where you can buy a non-plug-in hybrid vehicles. Yes, you heard me right, because in BC and also the federal government, the current standard includes only electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids, which means that it's basically a different type of vehicle than the hybrid that we have been used to over the last decade and a half. And so, for some reason, the Quebec government just realized in the middle of the year that they would not be able to reach their own goal, but because they expect that by 2030, or at least they hope that there will be approximately 2 million EVs on Quebec's road by 2030. That's less than 5 years away from now. And the truth is, we're very far from that count. So they decided to play with the numbers, and they said, look, we also going to include the hybrids vehicle into the lot, which is not the case for any other jurisdiction so far in Canada. So they're basically playing with the numbers to try to reach for a goal that is already unachievable and, well, impossible to achieve as it is. So that was the latest adjustment. And you will also be surprised to learn that if the federal government was setting its goal to 20% of all cars being sold next year, so for 2026, that would need to be zero emission or electric vehicles. Well, Quebec is actually going for I would say a more ambitious goal in that case, which would be 32.5%. So 1 out of 3 new vehicles next year in Quebec needs to be fitting that goal. So either as zero emission vehicles or as electric vehicle, plug-in hybrids, or regular hybrids in that case. And as we have seen in the rest of the country, there's already an outcry. There's already a strong mobilization from all the industry players and from all taxpayers saying that this goal for 20%, 1 out of 5 vehicle, is impossible to achieve. But Quebec is still going forward with its own goal. At least that's what we know for now, because apparently the Minister of the Environment, Benoit Charette, just recently, I mean, on the same day that Carney was doing his presser, last Friday, he basically said that there will be some evaluation of the current state of the EV cells in Quebec, and that there will probably be some additional modification. But it's already showing that the Quebec government is doing some carve out there and there to try to reach that unachievable goal, and it's clear that they're going to have to back down. We just don't know when, but it's sure that it's going to happen at some point very soon. And clearly that would be like a very good thing to happen for all Quebecers. But the truth is, if Quebec decides to cancel its own ban on gas and diesel vehicle, is going to be the same thing that happened with the carbon tax previously. I think that people remember we had those different provinces like Ontario and Quebec being in the same carbon market with California at some point. Then Ontario decided to go out of it, and in 2019 they were set with the federal carbon tax instead. So, for example, if British Columbia or Quebec decides to get out of their own ban, they will be under the federal regulation instead. So there is a two-level fight that we need to push on this one. We need to make sure that the provinces are actually abandoning that goal, but we also have to maintain the pressure to make sure that the federal government is doing the same as well.
You mentioned BC there. Franco, do you want to jump in here, or do you want me to go over the BC numbers?
No, I'll give her.
Okay, so Carson Bindez away. He's the BC director of the Taxpayers Federation. So I'm putting on my old hat from BC. Now, you were mentioning, Nicholas, that the provinces sometimes have different mandates when it comes to this stuff. And yeah, BC is going totally dumb. So coming up next year, unless they change things, unless Premier David Eby, okay, jumps on the bus here and realizes they need to scrap this thing altogether, starting on January 1st, 26% of all new vehicle sales in British Columbia have got to be battery-powered vehicles. And if you're not one of those folks who's an Elon Musk super fan, right, in the Lower Mainland, driving all these Teslas around, if you're not one of those folks and you actually still want to buy a gas or diesel-powered vehicle, it may not be available to you because it's going to be screwing up the markets, like starting right now at your local car dealership. So they're hanging on to that so far. 26% new vehicle sales by this January, and then it's going to be 90% by 2030. Okay, so the federal one, the big bad federal one, is going to have a full ban by 2035. So that's in 9 years. They're going to have a 90% ban in British Columbia in 4 years. Like, it's crazy pants. And so again, we've got a situation where Alberta Premier David Eby is going to be the last one on the bus. There was a situation when I was a kid. Okay. We went on a field trip. We went to this like farm. Okay. And all the kids got back on the bus and we start driving home, except one of the kids suddenly missing. And where was he doing? He was still at the farm, man. He didn't get on the bus. So, David Eby, you got to get on the bus here. They don't want to be the last kid standing there at the farm, right, Franco?
Yeah, I just started laughing when you started this little analogy because I have heard it before and I knew you were going to bring this up and I think it's
Sorry.
absolutely crucial. Also, people in the comments, Chris knows that EB's the BC premier, okay, but she's doing double duty
Did
right
I say
now. Like she's in
Alberta?
Alberta, and I'm like, believe me, folks, like Chris knows she's in Lethbridge, right? Like she's got it. You got to give her, give her a break, right? Like she
You're
was
going
our
to kill
BC
me.
director. Now I know you're gonna get absolutely roasted in the comments, but
I deserve it. Bring
folks,
it. It's fine.
Eve,
I deserve it.
come on, look, let's just bring it down right here, okay? So, this was always a half-baked policy, right?
Yeah.
The idea that the government was going to ban the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035, and it's awful for a couple reasons. Like the most obvious one to people immediately is like, in what world do politicians get off thinking they have the right to tell you what is best for your family, which car, which minivan, which truck that your family should buy, right? Where in the world does the government get off? Like why do they think they have this power over your lives? Number two, the cost, right?
Big time.
Think about the billions and billions of dollars it will require for the subsidies, okay, the power generation, the transmission lines, all the other infrastructure. Okay, does this government think that does this government not know that it's more than $1 trillion in debt? Like, which money tree is the government going to have to pluck, right, to pay for all of this? And the real answer is that every time you hear about the EV mandates or the ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicle sales by 2035, the one question you have to ask is how much is your power and tax bill going to go up to have to pay for all this, right? Massively, massively, right? Nicholas has already talked about the report that showed that the entire transition could cost what, up to $300 billion by 2040. Okay, absolutely bonkers. Now, we have released some Leger polling showing that more than half of Canadians oppose this. And of course, Canadians oppose this. Now, we are at a situation where, because of the backlash from Taxfighters, from Canadian Taxpayers Federation supporters, we are able to get Carney to back off, okay? To delay it by a year. But what that shows me is that there's some blood in the water, okay, folks? And when that's there, that's when you increase the pressure. So we have to act now. We have to be very public, especially with this 60-day review going on, where I worry it's just backroom negotiations with corporations on how big the corporate welfare check is going to be. That's my concern. I think the time to act is right now to push the Carney government to fully end the ban on the sale of new gas and diesel vehicles by 2035.
Yeah, big time. Any other notes here, Nicholas, or anything I haven't gone over that we need our tax fighters to know?
I think we have pretty much covered every angles about, well, this recent victory, but it's important to remind our folks this is clearly not the end. It's only the very start of this fight. We've been fighting it for a couple of years, but it took some time before it gets some traction. And now, like I said, it started as a rumor. Said people thought it was a joke. Now it's a threat, and now we even have the Globe and Mail editorial board saying that it's time to unplug this policy. So it clearly shows that by mounting the pressure, like we have done with this great taxpayers army, we can actually achieve so much. And so I keep talking to some of my friends sometimes about the petitions and stuff, and some of them keep saying, "Hey, look, I don't know why would I sign a petition because I don't know, I'm not sure if it works." But actually, the reason why we're here right now, the reason why we have this kind of victory is because we have been pushing these petitions, we have been pushing this movement so much. And so all I have to say is to anyone who is listening to our videos right now, please jump in the army, jump in the on our petition, go sign it on the taxpayers.com website, and help us make sure that this 60 days consultation leads to a complete scrap of this ban on gas and diesel vehicle.
I will also point out that what Franco's talking about here is super important and it's going on in the back rooms right now. This is also happening within cabinet. I promise you. Remember that guy named Stéphane Guilbeault? How happy do you think he is with this news that they're going to be climbing down out of this whole EV tree? Super not happy. And there's plenty of elected members of parliament within the Liberal caucus that are probably freaking out right now. And further, there's gonna be pressure groups NGOs, okay? Like all of Prime Minister Mark Carney's friends who loved this book that he wrote when he was the UN Special Envoy to blah, blah, blah. In this book, he's raving about EVs. He's raving about banning the sale of gas and diesel powered vehicles. There's like chapters on this thing in here. So this is a huge heel pivot. If he decides to pull the plug on this thing, it's going to be a lot of political capital. So it's imperative that everybody email your MP right now. Call into your local newsroom, call your local talk radio station, write a letter to the editor, say, get rid of it altogether. Folks, if you need any help on how to do this stuff, it's the best thing you can do is join our tax fighter army because we send you updates on this fight all the time. That's why we're this close, but we got to act right now. If you go to our website, taxpayer.com, sign the petition to get rid of the ban on the sale of gas and diesel powered vehicles.